Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a highly analytical look at a seriously provocative piece of source material. Today, we're breaking down a viral framework that claims to offer 7 permanent mental shifts to help you decode the hidden mechanics of the world. The source promises that if you internalize these shifts, you'll become what it calls dangerously smart. Now, fair warning, it is an intense, uncompromising, and deeply Machiavellian perspective on human behavior. We're going to impartially unpack this philosophy, putting all of its cynical claims on the table so we can examine exactly how it argues society actually operates. Right out of the gate, the source throws a pretty fascinating challenge our way. Are you dangerously smart? And look, the author isn't talking about being book smart or getting straight A's. They define dangerously smart as the ability to see what people are really doing behind what they're actually saying. So, do you truly understand the hidden motivations of others, or are you taking the world at face value? The framework asserts that most folks just go through life half asleep, totally believing the world operates exactly the way they were taught it should in grade school. Our goal today is to neutrally lay out the source's 7 shifts that supposedly wake you up from that illusion.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. First, the truth about intentions. Second, the myth of fairness. Third, enemies and hidden weaknesses. And finally, playing the game. Let's get into it.
Starting with Section 1, the truth about intentions, deconstructing words, and self-interest.
Diving into this first theme, we're examining what the text theorizes about human honesty and our real underlying motivations. The very first major mental shift proposes that people fundamentally just do not mean what they say. There's a stark contrast here. On one side, we have the fairy tale, where most people operate, believing words, trusting promises, and assuming that if someone says something, they mean it. But then there's the reality, which argues that words are just cheap performances used to manage perception. To become dangerously smart, the source insists you have to completely stop listening to what people say and start watching what they do. You've got to shift from believing words to observing behavior and patterns. Because according to this framework, actions are the only absolute truth, and ignoring words is your ultimate shield against manipulation.
To really ground this dark worldview, the text draws directly on the infamous 16th century political philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli. This quote absolutely nails the foundation for the second mental shift. Machiavelli argued that people don't act morally just because morality is a nice thing to do. They act morally when there's social pressure or when it directly benefits them. When nobody is watching, this philosophy claims, most people are just going to default to whatever serves them best. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Well, the source introduces this concept of universal self-interest. The core argument here is that every single person operates from self-interest, literally 0 exceptions. Behind every human decision, even acts of extreme kindness or sacrifice, there is a biological survival calculation happening in the background asking, what is in this for me? Now, the author clarifies that this isn't necessarily evil. It's framed more as a survival feature of humanity. The idea is, once you recognize that everyone is making this calculation, human behavior stops being confusing and becomes entirely predictable. You stop getting hurt by betrayals because, well, betrayal is simply someone choosing their own interest over yours.
Moving right along to Section 2, the myth of fairness, leverage, and the rules of the powerful.
Here, the framework aggressively shatters that childhood illusion that hard work and justice always prevail. This is the third shift. Fairness is a lie. We're taught how the system should work as a fairy tale, that merit, working hard, and playing by the rules is going to get you exactly where you want to be. But the author bluntly asserts that expecting this is just a recipe for staying stuck. The reality? The world actually rewards leverage, timing, being in the exact right place with the right people, and honestly, a degree of ruthlessness. According to this philosophy, complaining about unfairness is just totally wasted energy. The people who actually succeed are simply the ones who play the game that exists, rather than the game they wish existed.
And this perfectly sets up the fourth shift, the idea that the rules absolutely do not apply to everyone equally. The source proposes we are basically playing entirely different games based on our level of leverage. For regular people, they have to pay their taxes, wait their turn, and face severe punishment if they step out of line. But for powerful people, they cut corners, ignore regulations, and treat rules basically as polite suggestions. The deeply controversial takeaway here is that rules exist primarily to control the powerless, not to constrain the powerful. Following every single rule blindly, it argues, doesn't make you a virtuous person, it just makes you a controllable one. Once again, the framework leans heavily on Machiavelli to justify this kind of behavior. This quote really captures the mindset of those in power. This historical perspective is used to argue that powerful folks strategically ignore the rules the exact moment those rules stop serving them.
They aren't breaking rules out of pure malice. They're breaking them out of strategic utility, and they know they have the resources to avoid the consequences. It's just a ruthless calculation of risk versus reward.
Now for Section 3, Enemies and Hidden Weaknesses, the Danger of Proximity.
Tackling a highly sensitive topic here, the people closest to us and the supposed danger of showing vulnerability, brings us to the fifth shift. And honestly, it's probably the most cynical one yet. The text argues that your enemies will often pretend to be your friends. The logic is chillingly simple. A total stranger cannot truly betray you. Betrayal literally requires trust. Therefore, the people most capable of hurting you, competing with you, or undermining you are actually the ones closest to you. According to this view, proximity is danger. People will smile right at you while quietly gathering information about your weaknesses, just waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The advice? Stop taking friendliness at face value and become incredibly selective about who you let into your inner circle. Setting up the sixth mental shift, the framework introduces what is undoubtedly Machiavelli's most famous quote: "It is better to be feared than loved." The source uses this to push back aggressively on the modern narrative that vulnerability is some kind of superpower. In a perfect world, sure, the author concedes that showing your struggles might be brave, but in what it describes as a world full of predators, vulnerability is a massive, massive liability. The source maps out this brutal step-by-step sequence of what supposedly happens when you overshare in a competitive environment. Step 1, you show vulnerability. Maybe you share an insecurity or a deep fear. Step 2, strategic individuals, what the text literally calls predators, quietly file that information away. Notice they don't react immediately. Step 3, much later, during a conflict or a high-stakes moment of competition, your weakness is suddenly pulled out and exploited as ammunition against you. The huge takeaway the source pushes is that you absolutely must show strength publicly and handle your struggles privately, because in a competitive world, weakness actively invites attack. Finally, we hit Section 4, Playing the Game, the final shift to strategy. Bringing all of these dark, Machiavellian realities together into one overarching strategy for surviving and thriving, we arrive at what the text calls the game. This is the seventh and final shift. The source insists that there is a constant, completely unavoidable web of strategic positioning happening around you all the time. You might think that by keeping your head down, working hard, and avoiding office politics, you're somehow taking the moral high ground. But the framework argues that refusing to play doesn't make you noble. It just makes you a guaranteed loser. You are in the game, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So you can exist within this system in one of two ways. You can be the peace. You're passive, you follow all the rules, you hope your merit gets noticed, and you're completely blind to the traps set by others. If you refuse to play, well, you're just a piece in someone else's strategy. Or you can be the player. The player is intentional and highly strategic. The source borrows Machiavelli's brilliant concept of being both a fox and a lion. You need the cunning intelligence of a fox to recognize the traps, spot the manipulation, and see the hidden agendas. But you also need the brute strength of a lion to fight back and frighten off the wolves. You have to see the whole board and be willing to make your own moves. All right, let's pull it all together. Here is the complete ideological shift this framework promises. 1. Watch behavior, not words. 2. Expect self-interest in everyone. 3. Accept that fairness is a complete lie and leverage rules the world. 4. Understand that rules are unequal and powerful people break them. 5. Trust incredibly carefully because enemies hide as friends. 6. Shows strength because weakness invites attack. And 7. Play strategically because you're in the game whether you like it or not. The text argues that internalizing these 7 harsh realities is the exact formula for becoming dangerously smart and totally unmanipulatable. And that wraps up our look at this highly cynical, deeply strategic framework. The source does warn that adopting this worldview can be lonely, right? Because you can never view the world through that lens of innocence again. But it argues the trade-off is ultimate power over your own life. So taking a look at your own life right now and all the hidden mechanics we've unpacked today, we're going to leave you with the source's final provocative question to chew on. In the game of life, are you currently a piece being moved by others, or are you ready to become a player?